nations, as we have seen even the developments in the Middle East, slow growth, high levels of unemployment, and a cost of living crisis that is especially pronounced in metropolitan municipalities that have a high population density and thus greater competition for resources. To strike a balance between the growing demand for public services and the fiscally constrained economy, we have employed a combination of active debt management and revenue generation strategies, as well as spending restraint. This is reflected in this expenditure report for the period 1 April 2025 to 31 January 2026 that we will be out. As at end of January 2026, the total provincial receipt amounted to 149.2 billion, which translates to 83.7% of budgeted provincial receipt. Of this amount, 115.67 billion was derived from the provincial equitable share and 1.8 billion from the provincial financing. The provincial equitable share is a system where the national government distributes a portion of its revenue to the country's 9 provinces. The national government collects revenue from various sources like taxes and levies, which are deposited into the National Revenue Fund. A portion of this revenue is then allocated to each province based on a formula. The distribution formula aims to balance the needs of different provinces, taking into account the population size, poverty levels, and other factors. The provinces then use this funding to deliver essential services. The conditional grants amounted to 25.7 billion of the provincial receipts. Conditional grants from the National Treasury are specific allocations of funds from the national government to provinces and municipalities, with the condition that they are used for specific purposes aligned with national policy goals. These grants aim to ensure that provinces and municipalities adhere to national standards and priorities and can be used for capital projects or operational expenses, depending on the grant-specific conditions which are outlined in the Division of Revenue Act number 24 of 2024. Own revenue collection amounted to 5.9 billion, translating to 70% of the appropriated target of 8.4 billion for the 2025-2026 financial year. As at the end of January 2026, own revenue collection was below the straight line projection of 83%. As indicated, the Gauteng Provincial Government entered the 2025-2026 financial year with the main budget of 172.3 billion, which was later adjusted to 175.6 billion and adopted by the Gauteng Provincial Legislature. As at the end of January 2026, the overall expenditure for Gauteng Provincial Government stood at 144.4 billion, which represents 82.2% of the adjusted budget as departments accelerated spending to meet the service delivery needs of the people in the province. The breakdown of expenditure by departments, with the expenditure percentages rounded off per accounting practice, is as follows. The Department of Infrastructure spends 3.1 billion, or 83% of the adjustment budget of 3.7 billion. The Department of Environment expenditure is 480 million, or 71% of the 672.1 million adjusted budget. There are still some shared corporate functions between the Gauteng Department of Environment and the Gauteng Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, which contribute to spending outcomes for both departments. The Gauteng Provincial Treasury expenditure is 603.7 million, or 78% of the adjustment budget of 775.8 million. The Department of E-Government expenditure is 1.6 billion, or 80% of the adjustment budget of 1.9 billion. The Department of Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation expenditure is 821.1 million, or 79% of the adjustment budget. The Department of Agriculture and Rural Development expenditure is 479.8 million, or 70% of the adjustment budget. The Department of Community Safety expenditure is 2.1 billion, or 83% of the adjustment budget in the period of January 2026. The Department of Roads and Transport expenditure is 8 billion, or 79% of the budget of 10.1 billion. The Department of Human Settlement expenditure is 4.7 billion, or 76% of the adjustment budget of 6.1 billion. The Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs expenditure is 452.6 million, or 78% against the adjustment budget of 580.8 million. The Department of Economic Development expenditure is 1.4 billion, translating to 81% of the adjustment budget of 1.7 billion. Expenditure is driven by transfers to departmental agencies, which accounts for 76%. A total of 83% of the adjusted budget has been transferred to the department's entities, which are Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency, Gauteng Tourism Authority, the Gauteng Liquor Board, and the Gauteng Gambling Board. The Gauteng Provincial Legislature expenditure is 827 million, or 69%, and the budget that remained unchanged following the adjustment process. The Office of the Premier spending is 1.3 billion, or 79% of the adjusted budget of 1.6 billion. The Department of Social Development expenditure is 4.8 billion, or 85% of the adjustment budget. This department has seen a significant increase in the expenditure for school uniforms, dignity packs and food parcels for the period under review compared to the same period in the previous financial year, a reflection of the cost of living challenges impacting residents of Gauteng. The Department of Health expenditure is 55.4 billion, or 81% of the adjusted budget. Part of this is driven by compensation of employees, budget pressures under the HIV/AIDS sub-program that is impacted by the defunding, or rather withdrawal of funds by USAID, which was a major contributor to South Africa's and Gauteng HIV/AIDS response via the US President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, which is known as PEPFAR. The Department of Education expenditure is 58.6 billion, or 85% of the adjusted budget. The department's expenditure is driven by, amongst others, scholar transport, school nutrition, and school municipal services. With regard to conditional grants, expenditure of 23.5 billion has been recorded at the end of January 2026. This translates to 79% of the total budget of conditional grants. This expenditure is driven by grants related to the Department of Education, including the infrastructure grant, school nutrition grant, and early childhood development grant, and those in the Department of Health, such as the District Health Programs Grant, National Treasury, Tertiary Services Grant, and the Human Resources and Training Grant. However, the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development and Department of Human Settlements experienced a slow spending on some of the conditional grants in this period. Turning to infrastructure, the Gauteng Provincial Government has adopted a total adjusted infrastructure budget of 13.4 billion for the 2025-2026 financial year. In the period under review, expenditure amounted to 10.5 billion or 78% of the budget. Spending on infrastructure was driven by projects in the Department of Health, Department of Education, Department of Infrastructure Development, and Department of Roads and Transport. However, some infrastructure departments recorded slow expenditure due to a combination of delays in the implementation of projects and the builder's holiday that ended in the second week of January 2026. We want to commend all departments for the expenditure realized on their budgets in the period ending January 2026. This is a demonstration that departments are driving expenditure on key projects and programs to improve public service delivery in Gauteng in line with the priorities of the provincial government. However, we are concerned about the projected overspending in some departments due to overcommitments of budgets and accruals. More work still needs to be done to manage personnel numbers, especially in labor-intensive departments like education and health. That is why Provincial Treasury has issued the compensation of employees instruction note to manage the filling of vacant posts by departments, ensuring that all posts advertised should be within the confirmed available budget. Revenue collection from provincial sources, including interest earned from investments, motor vehicle licenses, gambling and betting taxes, and hospital patient fees, are important in augmenting our resources to fund provincial priorities. That is why we must continuously meet our revenue targets. We will outline some of the key and strong measures that we are taking to ensure that we realize this objective when we present the provincial budget to the Gauteng Provincial Legislature on the 10th of March 2026. The Provincial Treasury remains deeply committed to the principle of good governance, at the heart of which is accountability, transparency, and responsiveness. For this reason, we have and will continue to provide the residents of Gauteng with information pertaining to how money is being spent by departments and entities of the Gauteng Provincial Government. The department has an open door policy within the law to provide information that may be required by all stakeholders, including the media and particularly residents of Gauteng and businesses operating within the province. There should be no question that we are committed to this responsibility through sound financial management and good governance. The Gauteng Provincial Government maintains its commitment to realize a better life for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, MEC. We will take a round of hands for questions. You will introduce yourself and the media house you come from. I now open round of hands. Number one, number two, number three. In that order, number one. Number one. Yes. And she's number two. Number three.
Name, surname, and the media house.
Number four. Name, surname, and media house. Thank you.
All right. Good morning. My name is Mulu Komloto for ENCA. I just want MEC to ask you perhaps to elaborate. And on paragraph 2 of your statement, you do mention that Gauteng is characterized by geopolitical tensions. I just want you to, if you can,
Characterized by,
geopolitical tensions. If you can be specific in that regard. But second affect planning in particular when it comes to budgeting. I also then want to ask about the statement where you are saying that there's an element of overspending that in some departments due to overcommitments. How is that even allowed to happen? But also tell us specifically what do these departments overcommit on? And lastly, I might have missed it, but I did try to follow you as you went through. Is there perhaps a specific reason why there's no reflection on the state of the local government sphere in this briefing today?
Thank you. So number two.
Lotanda Makutelela from SABC News. My first question will go as under the Department of Roads and Transport, I see the expenditure is 8 billion. Does this include
Is how much?
8 billion?
Yes.
Does this include the e-toll bill? And then under the Department of Human Settlements, expenditure is 4.7 billion, less from 6.1 billion. Why is this, and does this include the number of houses being built?
Just repeat that.
Okay, under the Department of Human Settlements,
Yeah.
I see that 4.7 billion was spent. The actual budget was 6.1 billion. Why is this? Why is the underspending? And also, does this include the number of houses being built in Gauteng? If so, how many houses were built under the period review? And also, the last question. And then, what is Gauteng doing in addressing the issue of ghost workers and any retirement?
Thank you. Number three.
Gadel Supporter from Newsroom Africa. MEC, you do say own revenue collection sitting at 70% instead of the projected 83%. Could you please perhaps outline what is causing this shortfall? And then MEC, last year, this specific update, you gave it, I think, on the 7th of January, which was before the budget was announced. This year, budget has been announced, I mean the national budget, which we heard from Finance Minister last week, and it comes after. And it also comes after the State of the Nation address. So in the State of the Nation address, the President did outline specifically on water-related issues that the Water Committee, he'd be chairing that and moving to say that where local government or where provincial government is struggling, now national is stepping in. Is the timing of today's update in line with considering some of the updates we've heard from the State of the Nation address as well as the budget that we heard last week?
Thank you, ma'am. Number four.
Good morning, everyone. My name is MEC Maile from News. I've perused the statement and described its charge of here and straight to the point. One of the first, someone from your team, I've been chronicling these stories for the past 2 decades. I feel I'm underreporting when it comes to disaster funds and emergency funds. Can someone explain to me how does it function? And then question 2, if you can just convey the message to the Department of Agriculture and Conservative Government. We are also underreporting.
Department of?
Agriculture and Conservative. We are also underreporting in this department. I know someone who with your political hardship from a different political stable. Just tell them we need stories from those guys. We're not reporting. People don't know. Like we're focusing on your department. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now give the MEC and the panel the chance to respond. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. When you go to that second paragraph, we are not saying Gauteng is characterized, but we are saying the environment that we are in. And that's why I made an example about the developments in the Middle East. You will know what's happening in the war, Ukraine, Russia, and many other political developments worldwide, the tariffs, all the stories. And all those things have got a bearing on the budget, because as we do explain in the statement that the budget comes from 3 sources. Firstly, the equitable share. We explain here that the equitable share is the money that comes from national, which is spread to provinces based on a formula that is population, poverty, economy, education, health, and all that. Then the second source of revenue is the conditional grants, which comes from there to address specific goals and national imperatives. And then the third one is own revenue, our revenue. So if the economy is not performing well in the country, and if national government is not collecting through SARS by and large, whatever that comes to us as a province and municipalities is informed by that. So that's why when you give an account, there has to be an appreciation that the political environment, whether in the country or in the continent or in the world, has got an implication on the environment that we find ourselves. So it is in that context that we were saying what we have written in the statement. You know, the movement of people affects us a lot as Gauteng. And just to give you specific numbers, the last time I checked, at least 230,000 people were coming to Gauteng every year. And just to give you an example about education, every year we have at least 50,000 learners who come from different parts of the country. And when they come here, they need more desks, they need more learning material, they need more schools. So this is practical. It affects us. And that's why when I answer the question about, and maybe firstly explain what we mean, we're not saying there's going to be overspending and overcommitment. It's actually based on some of these practical things, because you have not planned for 50,000 more kids when you budget, but they're going to come or they come. It might be 60,000, 70,000. In health is the same. In education, so the movement of people has a big impact on us as a province, and it has a bearing on how we perform, not just how we spend, how we perform as well. Because if you build 10 schools and you find that you need 20 schools, people will say you have underperformed, despite the fact that you have built 10 schools, which is what you have been allocated, which is what you have allocated the budget for. So it does not only have an impact on the budget, it also has an impact on our performance, and that's why we are interested in that. And then, yeah, so we're not allowing any element, or any overspending. As I've just explained to you, that there might be in certain instances unforeseen and unexpected circumstances. But even that's the case, we have a system to detect and monitor. So the provincial treasury doesn't allow that. And that's why you'll see when we give you the end of the year financial statement, we report on something called accruals, meaning the activities that have been undertaken in this financial year, but they might not have been paid for in this financial year, because Treasury would have said, education, you can buy 100 desks, but education needs 300 desks. If it doesn't get 300 desks, kids are not going to be taught. So education will have to get 300 desks, but because they don't have money to pay for 300 desks in this financial year, they will have to incur that cost and all that. So you will, those who are accountants can explain it better. And me and you, Moloko, are not accountants. Yeah, so, but you do understand. I've tried to simplify it for you. So we're not allowing anyone to understand, but because of certain trends, we might end up. We did, Moloko, in the last press conference, I think it's Heidi who covered it. We did the state of the local government separately. We were not sure whether to do and include the recent, because now the AG has concluded the audit. We received the audit reports of all municipalities. So we didn't, because then we would have dealt with a lot of things. And that's why, Mr. Corlett, you think that, no, we are bombarding you with information, which it's because if we brought local government information here and this, it's so much to be, so we might have to call you to deal with local government audit outcomes, because, and we go into detail, municipal, what are the issues and all that. So we might have to do that. So it's not because we are bored or we want you to come and just spend time with us. It's because this information is important and the public is interested in it. And we have to also ensure that we structure it in such a way that the information makes sense and people can consume it, and it's not it's not overhyped. So that's why we don't have that, Moloko. Notando, the budget of transport is about 9 billion. In that 9 billion, they pay for roads, maintenance, building of roads, their salaries, their operations, including for Gauteng. Gauteng. You heard I didn't say anything about e-tolls, because, and that's why even e-tolls, you will remember in the last two payments that we have done, we had a press conference as treasury to say we are paying the e-tolls. That money is not with Department of Transport, it's with the treasury. So we are managing it from the treasury. And as you know, we've paid close to 10 billion by now. We will announce to you in June, I think, when we pay again a significant amount, which will be close to more than half of what we owe. So we're close to paying off the e-tolls. It has taken a huge strain on us, and we've not been able to meet some of our demands to the expectation of the citizens and consumers because of that debt. But we are on course, and we think it's a responsible thing to do. So we will brief you in detail about the e-tolls and where do we get other sources and all that. So it's not here, as you've seen. So it doesn't, it's not captured there, but e-tolls are budgeted for, rest assured. And then the Department of Human Settlement, yes, that amount includes houses, that number of houses that are built. I think last year they've built about 7,000. It should be 7,000 or more this year. So that 4.7 billion includes budget for their salaries. So the 6 billion, for salaries and the running costs. So not all the 6 billion is for houses, but the bulk of it, at least 5 billion of that money, it's for houses, it's for stands that are allocated to people which are safest, it's for bulk infrastructure and other services. So that 6 billion is meant for that. And then the ghost workers, I think departments from time to time, they we actually run and check the PESAL system, which is payment system. From time to time, people are asked to report and zivers and all that. Big departments like health and education also do that, but as you know, that process is run from that point. We will be announcing some money on the retirement, early retirement, in line with the announcements made by the minister. And there are people who have already applied for early retirement, and we will include that money in the budget. So, Katlego, the 70%, and you know, there's a part we didn't include here, and I think it's deliberate in the statement. Our revenue, the main sources is motor vehicle licenses, it's gambling board, gambling taxes, liquor, and others. But why am I making this point? The motor vehicle licenses, we collect that money through our agents, and in this case is the municipalities and the water issue, and we can't say it's not our responsibility as government. It affects us, it affects Gauteng residents, it affects the economy. But if we don't budget for it, it's not because it's not important, it's because, as I've said, when you allocated money, it's based on the formula. But if needs be, we will try and find resources like we've done on energy before. You will remember we allocated more than 400 million, is it 400 million, HOD, on energy, yeah, despite the fact that's not our competence. We will also be allocating some money in the coming budget on energy because it's still a big problem. There's still people who are, so when we allocate, it means we cut in other areas. So that issue of water remains very close to our hearts, and we will attend it with the seriousness that it deserves, and that's why we're working. And the president on what work and money is being allocated. The Premier as well in the state of the province dealt in detail with the interventions that we're making with municipalities. I think don't wait for agriculture or any other department. We are supposed to account to the public as a government. So and that's why from time to time you send us questions. So don't complain. Go to them. Thank you. HOD on these other issues.
Thank you very much, MEC. Good afternoon. Oh, good. Oh, still good day. On the issue of disasters, there is a disaster fund at a national level that is administered, being led by the Ministry National Treasury, working together with other departments at a national level. So that fund, provinces will apply when disasters actually take place and allocations happen. We know that the allocations that have been recently made related to the floods that happened in the Eastern Cape. We know that funding was also allocated when it comes to KZN. But as we were busy with that, meaning the team finance of the country, disasters happened in Limpopo and Mpumalanga, as we saw at the beginning of the financial year. So you will see that funding will come in that regard. So, you know, there are major disasters and there are disasters. So it's in certain instances, something won't be called a disaster, but as a province, we assess those things if the funding is not coming, because I think with the impact of climate change, we are seeing that we are having more disasters than the fund, you know, can carry. So to a certain extent, certain aspects of, you know, eventualities will have to be catered for. We know when it rains, we must be prepared that the Jacques-Skay River will flood, and that's going to affect the housing department. So some of those things is things that factor into their operations and help for, and make provisions for that. But the main structured disaster management is handled at a national level for the country through the fund that I've already indicated, I think.
Is there anything?
Colleagues, we would take a second round for follow-up questions, if any. Going once, going, okay. Mr. Morocco?
Thanks. Just a small one. In regard to the issue of funding for scholar transport, I mean, we have had the Department of Education lamenting lack of funding, that they have to reprioritize and all that. And we have also seen the transporters themselves taking to the streets. How are you attending to that matter? Because some of them are saying, look, we are out of business. It's impossible. It's as if we are expected to bankroll the government. Because if we withdraw our services, children will not go to school.
Thank you. Mr.
Scholar transport. The problem is not lack of funding. The funding is there. We have allocated about 1.1 billion in this financial year for scholar transport. The problem is that issue related to the question you are raising about the inflow of people into the province. So you've got more learners in schools. I said to you, you've got at least 50,000 more every year. So it's also linked to that issue of overspending and overcommitment. This is a practical example where you can have about, let's say, you have budgeted for 100,000 kids, and then there's 130,000. So you can't say to the 30,000 kids, we're not going to give you transport because we have not budgeted for you. Ke kgomo ya moshate. Wa e gapa molado, a o e gape molado. So if you give them transport, you'll be blamed for overcommitting. You don't give them transport, you'll be blamed for caring, for not caring. That's why what we have done now is to find a solution, a permanent, what I'll call a permanent solution to the problem. And that's why in the budget, one of the issues we're talking about is how we want to use the triple Ps to help us implement some of our programs, like scholar transport is one of them. And what do I mean? We need 3,600 buses in the Department of Education to transport these learners. If we were to buy those buses as government, we must have at least 7 or 8 billion rands just to buy them. I'm not talking about maintaining them. I'm not talking about building depots to house them and all that. And I've said to you, the budget we have allocated for that function is 1.1 billion. So it means you will not have the money to buy the buses next week, next month, in the next 3 years or 4 years. So through the triple Ps, we should be able to then raise the money, working with the private sector, and use our budget to guarantee the repayment. We have done that with Gauteng. By the way, on the 28th of March this year, Gauteng is officially handed over to the Gauteng government as its asset, meaning we've finished paying for Gauteng. When we built Gauteng, we spent 26 billion. Today, as we speak to you, and by the end of May, when we receive the asset, it's worth anything between 45 and 53 billion rands. That's the asset of Gauteng government. So that's the power of triple Ps. So we will, I think by end of March, through the Premier, announce the preferred bidder for the new concession that will last for for the next few years. The process is at an advanced stage, and we are happy that Gauteng is one of the triple Ps that have been successful and which demonstrates that if we were to look at programs like scholar transport and implement them using that model, we can achieve a lot. And that's why we have already looked at that issue of scholar transport to say, yes, we have a budget. It will never be enough because every year there's more kids coming to Gauteng. And we need to build more than 100 schools in Gauteng. We will not have the money to build that or next month or next year. So how do you manage this through triple Ps and you can be able to achieve results quicker? So the scholar transport, the issue is not that the budget is not allocated. The demand is high because of these challenges we're talking about of in-migration and people coming to Gauteng. And by the way, many people come to Gauteng not only because they want jobs and a better life, but also because we are doing well in education. We are doing well in education, in public schools. If you look at not just the matric results, but if we were to use matric results, you look at the quality of the results, the number of girl childs who pass, the number of degrees that we, bachelor's passes that we produce, the number of kids who are now passing maths and science.